Carrie, and welcome to the Make Life Rich Movement podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
For my PR gals out there, we have an absolute legend with us on the show today. Carrie Crecca Maitoza is also better known as Miss PR Piggy. And when I say that I do not take lightly that we have this legend on the show today, I mean that I have been pestering Carrie for at least a year to share her story because I just am enamored with the way that she has single-handedly provided so much love and support for all of us PR gals in ways that I don't think she's fully aware of. But Carrie, I thank you so much on behalf of all of us PR gals for your memes at just the right time, in the nick of time, every time, and your creativity and just your love for writing and for PR, because it's just really beautiful to not only read your words, but to kind of get to connect with you on so many things that we all have in common as publicists. And it's a really beautiful and wacky club to be a part of. But we thank you for being our ringleader.
Thank you so much. That is so sweet. And it does bring me a lot of joy to know that so many people feel so validated by the memes that I make or the newsletters I write. So it's really fun and I have a great time doing it.
You have an amazing career, and I honestly just love the way that your career started out. And it is a little different than, how most of us get to kind of start off in their PR career, but take us back to your first day on the job and kind of what you were doing and what it felt like to kind of to arrive, to make it, to be a publicist.
Yeah. So I got my first job through my supervisor at Elle at the time. I was an intern at Elle when I was in college. I went to FIT, and part of like in your senior year, you had to do an internship. And I really wanted to work in editorial initially. So I was interning at Elle. I absolutely loved it. I was obsessed with this job. And it was so fun to be in the fashion closet and see Kate Lanphier walking in, and she just looked incredible. And I loved her style so much. And it was just like a really fun time to be there. I think I started like 2 days after Josie became creative director there. And it was like, yeah, it was like an iconic time.
Whoa, talk about an iconic time. My cheeks hurt. That's like, I vividly remember that happening. And this was, for some of you that are a little younger listening, this was the era of magazines. Like, all that mattered were magazines. My goodness, like, what a time to get in there and get to learning under that empire with like him at the helm. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it was cool. And I even went to shoots with him, like just him and I in the car, like it was amazing. I had such a great experience. And I really wanted to work in editorial, to be totally honest. But there were no jobs available at Elle at the time. And I also had a few like heart to hearts with my supervisor, who was amazing and was very supportive of me and very supportive in trying to help me find work following graduation. And she kind of, she was very candid with me one day, and she was like, "Are you going to have to pay your own bills when you graduate?" And I was like, "Yes, I will." And she was like, "Then do not work in editorial. We get paid nothing. You should work in PR. It's on the other side of things. It's basically the same thing, but different. And like, I think you're going to be good at it. And I already know of a job that's available, and I want to recommend you."
Wow.
So, I was like a young kid, and I've mentioned this in my newsletters, but at the time, like my dad was very sick with cancer. And, it was like I had to do this. I didn't have a choice really. So I was like, okay, I'll try PR. Never really thought of myself as a publicist, but I, took her advice. And my first job, the one that she got me, was at Escada. I started there as like a temp, and they took me on full time as a PR assistant, like maybe a few months in. That job had its difficult moments, but I learned so much there. Like, it was such a good learning experience. Like you
Mhm.
said before, this was kind of like the heyday of magazines. This was like, big magazine editors coming into our showroom. Like, everything had to be perfect, buttoned up. And there was just a lot of pressure on that front.
Yeah.
But in a way, it was like really the best education, even though it felt like a lot for me. Like, sometimes it was such a
Mhm.
good education. I learned so much from the two women who um, I was reporting to.
Mhm.
Like, my manager, the PR manager at the time, she was very chic. She was very she was just in the mix, and like she taught me about caviar. Like, I didn't know a thing about this stuff coming into
Mhm.
it.
I
I
love
just
that.
loved fashion, and I was just like a fashion girly. I didn't care, I wanted to be a part of it. And but she kind of taught me all about like the lifestyle and
Mhm.
kind of how to fit in basically with, this echelon of people that, I didn't know or see or touch growing up, so it was
Yeah.
a really good education in that way. And I still think about that experience often.
Wow. So many things are like popping up for me and just like knowing you and your work. I find it really beautiful that a woman took you under her wing to not only like give you the ins on life and be like, hey, this is like life's going to get expensive here. This is a dream to follow, but like not yet. Like go do this, get your wheels like greased, figure out life. But I enjoy very much that you then also got taken under the wing of a woman that taught you about culture and not culture from like a perspective of like upper classness, but just like how to observe the world around you and like the different things that you weren't a part of or aware of. And you're writing now and how you see the world in PR does it's you do have such a beautiful view of how the world works, and it is put together in such an aesthetically beautiful way, but also makes, good common sense. Like the way that you see the world is really culturally front facing, but in such a positive and happy way. And it is evident that you love PR for the reasons of supporting and helping culture to keep evolving and changing. But I love that these two women kind of planted those seeds in you to be like, hey, like we see something in you. Go
Yeah.
this way. Think about it like that. Like it's just beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, I know. I know. I think for a little while I was a little bit like, I kind of regretted that I didn't go in the editorial route. I always wanted to be like a fashion editor. And sometimes I would think about that experience and be like, it's so terrible that, she told me to do that for money. I was already broke. I would have continued to be broke, and I would have like made it work. I'm scrappy and I'm resourceful, and I would have figured it out. But in reality, if I really go back to that time, I was desperate, and she knew that, and she was protecting me. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool. It's really cool. And I love that, during that time in PR and in life, it was really difficult to be a woman anywhere, let alone like be a woman that wants to help younger women like get their feet in the game. So shout out to women helping other women, even when it was like socially just so rough for them to begin with. And I think it's also really cool the way that you look back on that time in PR. I was like just starting out. I started 2 years after you, so we were kind of coming up in the same, like, paying attention to the culture and how everything is changing, and there was just such a really cool crew of people that if you weren't a part of it or you didn't have access to them or, like, you just weren't in it in the club, and Instagram wasn't a thing yet, like, we were really clamoring as professionals to try to get the attention of these people in that inner crowd, and it really was such an elusive game to become a part of. But I love the way that you talk about PR back in like 2000, like 7, 8, 9, 10, like in the trenches of when it was really melding into what I would think is the foundations of the PR system we exist in now. But what was it like for you going from an in-house PR space to an agency and like having that creative freedom within the in-house position and then just changing into a totally different facet of operating in PR?
Yeah. So following when I was at Escada for maybe like 3 years, and then I went to Etro, and I was the PR director at Etro in the US for almost 7 years. I was there for a while, and I went to an agency following that job. And yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of a shock to the system, to be totally honest with you, because in my roles, in-house luxury at in-house luxury brands, it was the mechanics were very different day to day. I wasn't necessarily pitching stories. It was more about product placement and fashion well stories and that the prestige of all of that. And by the time I reached, going to the agency, I was working on many different types of brands, and like they didn't have that. Like they didn't have a runway show necessarily. Some of them did, some of them didn't. They didn't have that, like, we're shooting, the collections issue and we need like look 42, tomorrow, like the day after the show. It's like there was none of that. It was more about founder profiles and collection launches and collaborations. And it was just like a different tenor. And, going from one brand that you're totally in on, you've chugged the Kool-Aid, you are involved not every step of the way, but like you're involved in a lot of like the brand side, and you're fighting with wholesale for samples. Like, is it going to Neiman Marcus or is it going to Vogue? Like, where's it going? It's just very different than to go to an agency. You're working on multiple brands. They're not necessarily like the most coveted luxury brands in the world. So you're really trying to drum up interest. Yeah, it was just a totally different experience. And honestly, it was, that first experience I mentioned at Escada was such a learning experience, but also so was working at the agency. That is where I got exposure to a senior leadership team. I was on the senior leadership team. I had access to the P&L. I understood the financing of the clients versus the hours we were spending on the brands and the work. Working at an agency set me up to be a freelancer today. If I did not have that experience at an agency, there is no way I could have easily transitioned from an in-house role to being a freelancer. And I know people do it, but I'm just not like as business savvy, I don't think, like that. And the agency was kind of a crash course in like how you manage clients and work for yourself.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it is the perfect breeding grounds to figure out how you'd like to do it for yourself, when you leave that space.
Yeah.
I would imagine just too the pace of the work that you were getting and the expectations they set for you are probably pretty adjacent to the amount of time that you're putting in as a solopreneur. But I wonder, did like the schedule and the way that they went about business that was on the completely different end of the spectrum from Escada and your other positions, was that something you think that helped you to create that business routine and foundation for yourself to be able to hit the ground running and not necessarily be worrying about having the business acumen, but knowing like, okay, this is how I need to structure my work for this client to achieve this result?
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, that just becomes so much more apparent at an agency because you really don't have a choice. You have to really structure out your time, and you just look at it from a different perspective. You're kind of zoomed out a little bit, which I actually love at an agency. I love having a little bit insight to, okay, this client is paying X amount of dollars. We're spending X amount of hours on it. We're actually over servicing this client. Time to cut back. Like, I had no concept of that when I was at Etro. When I was at Etro, I was like, I love you. I live you. I breathe you. You can have my firstborn child. I'm wearing your brand every day. On the weekends, I'm telling all my friends about it. You own me. You own me and all my time. Like, that's
Yeah.
how it was.
Yeah.
So, with an agency, there's like a little bit more boundaries. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
That's what I
Yeah.
noticed anyway. There was a little bit more of a boundary where it's like your personal life and professional life aren't blending or bleeding into each other as much. There's a little bit more of an arm's length, which is nice.
Yeah. And I wonder too if it, like, the less familial vibe that you were, having at the in-house position, I wonder, was there a big culture change for you going into the agency from after being in-house and being like almost like a part of the family? You're in like all these meetings and adjacent to decisions. What was that change like for you mentally? Like, I can imagine it had to be like pretty abrasive compared
It
to what
was,
you were dealing with before.
oh my God. I mean, that's such a good question. And that's such a good observation. I think yes, it was so hard. It was so hard. And it was very sad for me too. Yeah, I mean, I was used to taking Mr. Etro, like Mr. Etro, the Etro, the guy who created the company, the little old Italian grandpa, taking him around New York City and shopping with him and eating with him and pitching him ideas for the company, and he would approve it because he was like, yeah, that sounds great. And so I mean, that was my experience there. And then it's like you go to an agency and it's very different. You PR is viewed very differently, I think, in an agency setting. It's like they love you and they need you, but there's also a little bit of tension at all times because they kind of see you as super expensive. And, you're kind of asking for more and more. It's like, oh, well, okay, this flight is over 6 hours. Like, do we get to fly business? And it's like a question mark. Like, is that even, are we contracted for that? And I hate to sound like, I know that's like first world problems, but it's like very different coming from like an in-house luxury brand going to an agency. And then it's like, oh, you're in coach 100%. Like you're in coach. You are not part of the family. Like you are not close to the brand like that. It's just very, very different. And that
Mm.
was definitely like a culture shock for me.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
It makes a lot of sense, and I actually love for you that you got to start off on the familial side of things because I think it seems like it really just nurtured your creativity and your passion for just all things fashion, sharing like what you love about fashion with others, strategy. And I wonder when moving into the arena of going to the agency, like typically we have it reversed, right? Like we can get that agency job right away and it kind of like crushes our spirit. And then we're like, oh, PR just sucks. And then like you fall into the chasm of believing that it's always going to be hard and difficult and shitty and like very upsetting all the time. But I love that you kind of got the reverse so that you could see that there is not just a pinnacle that you can reach to where you are getting these very beautiful in home like positions that are giving you that access, giving you the ability to exercise the creativity, be seen, be heard. It like feels very validating, all of the things. But was there a moment within the agency to where you recognize like, okay, I'm ready to like not be doing this anymore. I need to
Yeah.
feel more like fire, more passion,
Yeah.
more creativity. Was that when Miss PR Piggy came into play?
Yeah, it was almost exactly like in tandem. I think it was hard because I really liked my agency job a lot. The team I worked on was incredible. Like I was heading up menswear at the agency actually, so all my brands were menswear brands and that was really fun. My team was so amazing. Like I'm obsessed with them. I still am. I'm in touch with all of them. Like it's just the best. And I really miss working with all of them. But I mean, there was some culture things that were tricky for me there, and the company was going to restructure. And I was not on board with the restructuring and where that would have put me. I wouldn't have been in charge of the menswear team anymore. Like it was a very odd, I felt, restructuring, and it really did push me out, and I ended up quitting voluntarily. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I really was at a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like my mental health is suffering. I think what did it for me was I was on vacation in Italy and like I had to do a deck like while I was on vacation and I was like, I'm not going to do this again. Like Life is too short. Sorry.
Yeah, man, wow.
Yeah.
It is those moments of overstepping the boundary to where you're like, okay, like I've had enough. It's
Yeah.
the hard decision is here now, and it's a really easy one to make. You just forced me to make it. So, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
understandable.
I know. And it was really tough. It was such a difficult decision to make. Went back and forth for months. I was really I don't know if this is TMI, but I really was not in a financial position to just quit my job. But it was like, I've been in therapy for 100 years, and I had the same therapist since like 2011. And she knows me very well and really advised me that this was going to be the best for me. And I worked with her on kind of like troubleshooting all of those practicalities. I got rid of my apartment. I sold all my stuff. I moved in with my sister for free. Like it was a whole thing. And then it's like things just started happening after I got rid of this job. I started Miss PR Piggy maybe like a week later. And, it's funny because initially when I launched, I was obviously anonymous, but my team at TCS knew it was me the whole time.
Oh my god, it's like your
Yeah,
own
the
little
team I
gossip
speak
girl
of,
crew.
they all knew it was me.
My gosh, I, like, love that even more. It's like the lore behind it. It's like, ooh.
Yeah, I know. So I think being jobless in a way like gave me a little bit of a push. Like I didn't have a boss or clients to upset. Like it was gonna be fine.
Mhm.
And what's really wild, I've never shared this story, but when I launched Miss PR Piggy, started like getting traction very quickly at an alarming rate, I would say. And I
Yeah.
was seriously like outside of my body, like watching all this happen. And I'm like, wow, this person is so funny. Who's doing this? And I was like, oh, wait, it's me. Like, it was really weird. Like, it was a kind of an outer body experience.
I love that.
And my agency reached out to me and they were like, oh my God, this account is genius. We love it. We want you to work for us. Like, we're going to pay you all this money to make you memes for us. It was so nuts. The company that I had just left. And it was just, yeah, I mean, I've talked to a lot of like, you know, spiritual people about that instance, and it was like the minute I showed who I really was, it was like they wanted me, but I couldn't do that when I was there. So it
Mhm.
was a lot of lessons like where I'm like, okay, I have to like be myself now, like this
Yeah,
is it.
forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I literally found you, like, a week after you launched. I remember because I was at the time doing, in-house marketing for a pharma company,
Yeah.
and I was in living, breathing hell 24/7, 365. The company was an overseas company, 12 hours ahead of us, so it was just, like, constantly on at all times. I hated the company. I hated what we were doing. I didn't believe in it at all.
Yeah.
And your account was truly, like, hand to God, the only thing that saved me during the day. I would wait for you to post. I had a notification. I would look at it, and then it would be like, "Damn, this is funny." Like, whoever this woman is, I truly cannot I knew it was a woman. I'm like, "I cannot wait to the day where I get to be like, 'Thank you,'" which is this
Oh,
moment right now. "Thank you." And then I literally would then go to the comments like, "Oh my God, please, like, I need to hear everyone commiserating. What's your shitty thing today? Because this is my shitty thing today."
yeah.
And it wasn't like it was like a bash page or a place to like go unload and be unhinged, but it was truly just a place to be seen. And I feel like our industry has always been a bit disheveled, but
Yeah,
we're always expected to be the calm duck above water, but below it's like a hot mess.
for sure.
Like, please go in on that because I feel like the essence of Miss PR Piggy is just you literally just you lay it out there in the most truthful, direct manner possible. You just cut the shit. It's immediate. We understand. We all get it.
Yeah.
I get a very quick, deep chuckle and I feel satisfied. And I'm like, yep, that's it. Okay, great. My day's made. You just made my day better because you see me actively sitting at my desk being miserable. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think it's because I'm a very observant person. and I always have been. And I think it's just about observations and putting words around them and finding the emotion in it. That's like what I would say is huge. Like whenever I'm making a meme, the first thing I think about, and again, I've never mentioned this before, but this is like a little meme tutorial. The first thing I think about is what is the emotion that I'm feeling right now? What is that emotion? And how can I match that with a picture? So then I search for a photo with that emotion attached to it. Miss Piggy sad, Miss Piggy crying, Miss Piggy angry, whatever it is. And then I put the words around the experience around it afterwards. So when you connect like the emotion to it and you recognize that in yourself, you're like, oh my God, I've had that before and that is so annoying or whatever. That's when people are like really like, whoa, I feel so seen.
So seen, like so seen. Where did the choice for it to be Miss Piggy come from? Are you just like an OG Miss Piggy fan?
No, it was like, the alliteration, PR, Miss Piggy. There was another account going around at the time called Fashion Week Frog, and it was like Kermit the Frog. And I was like, and that was run by an editor. And I'm like, I could do this because I was already making memes on the back end. I'm going to turn on the
Mhm.
light. Sorry.
Okay.
It's just really dark in here. So, I think it was like, it was that. It was sort of like the perfect storm when that account launched. And I was just like, we've heard from editors, we hear from editors all the time, and we've heard from them for so many years. And like, we don't really hear from PR people. And I'm like, okay, Kermit, what's the opposite of Kermit? Miss Piggy. What's the opposite of an editor? PR. I'm like, PR Miss Piggy. It's like, it was too
Mhm.
perfect. I had to do it. And
Mhm.
I already had memes like stockpiled. So I was like, I'm doing this.
Love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
So it didn't have anything to do with like Miss Piggy really, other than that. It was just like, this is my answer to that kind of thing. And like,
Ugh,
yeah.
so good. Like literally so good.
Yeah. But I'm very happy that, sorry,
No, you're good.
again. But I'm happy that, the account has taken on, it's been almost 6 years now. So the account has taken on something where the majority of my followers have no idea what Fashion Week Frog is, like there's no association there. I think in the beginning there was, but now it's like, yeah, most people don't really know that, there was even that account. That account I don't think is active anymore.
Yeah. I love what you kind of catalog within your range of content for so many reasons, but I think the biggest one for me is everything is changing so quickly, right? Like no industry is really spared from being completely different than it was 10 years ago. But I think the beauty of PR has and always will be the storytelling aspect of it. And I love so much that you were almost like chronologizing the history of PR in New York and your time spent there in a way that so many of us were either there for a part of it or were pining to be in that space. And like it just, you tell so many stories, and I'm like, oh my God, that editor, or like, OMG, like I remember when that whole drama went down, or
Yeah.
it just like brings up so many memories for me. And like thinking of oh my God, what was it called? The New York fat no, oh my God, Fashion Night Out, and like that very first year that it happened, and like you just bring such nostalgia for the parts of PR that I think have died and
Yeah.
like kind of left the building. They're like gone for
Yeah.
some reason. The heart of it, the aspirational points of it, it was like the North Star, and you were so great at taking in and recognizing all these times and these moments. And when you do recall them, it really does take us down memory lane to show how much the industry has changed. And I feel like you're the best person to ask this question, but where do you see that PR has gone throughout your career, and where do you think it's headed? Because we all know that what's happening right now isn't necessarily working, and it's not healthy for really any of us. So
Yeah.
where have we come from, and where do you think we're headed?
I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think there's been so many changes within and since the pandemic. I think we're still really grappling with like the pandemic, to be totally honest with you, and the new normal, and ushering like a new generation of editors, of PR people. I think there's just a lot in the mix right now that we're still kind of trying to figure out, like, what is the new normal. I don't think anyone really has the answers right now of like where we're going, but I do think that there is still a major place for PR and PR people, because
Mhm.
brands still want press. They still want publicity, and that I don't think that is ever going to change. So it will just take on new iterations over time, of course, and everything evolves, like you said. So I think this is just kind of like a natural progression of things. However, I do think it is very intense right now because we did have a global pandemic, and that's just the reality. Like, there's so many things that are different nowadays. Like, I've heard through the grapevine, it's very difficult to get young editors and young PRs to have a coffee together in person because they didn't come up that way. They came up, just doing emails. And it's like that's not really how PR is done. And of course there's room to evolve that as well, but it's really, really hard when you're emailing someone and they don't know who you are.
Yeah, it's like a fish in a barrel.
Yeah, it's hard. And I
Interesting.
hate to admit that because I really like to be the person that's like, oh, relationships like don't matter as much anymore. Times are different. And like on one hand, that's true. But then on the other hand, if you really need to secure a story, it just helps so much more if you know the person on the other end that you're pitching.
Whew, man, such a change. The public and public relations is getting a little gray here, little concerning.
Yeah.
I really do. We've talked about this before, and of course, we're going to get to repressed and the community that you've built over on Substack. But speaking of Substack, I think we've spoken a few times about all the layoffs that just happened at the top of the year and how many editors and writers were literally just like upended. And when you are removed from these positions and you're forced to kind of go start your own thing, I think in, maybe a decade ago, it would have been a lot different of a story. And it certainly was in 2008 when there was that huge round of cuts of journalists and publications. But it seems now to me that a really viable media source that I think as publicists we should all start paying a lot more attention to and putting a lot more gravity behind are the experienced writers on Substack. And they may not be with New York Times or WWD anymore, but now you have direct access to them and it's very clear what they're writing about. It's very clear how often they're writing. It's very clear who their audience is. And I think to me, it feels like a little bit of a slam dunk. And considering that people that are following writers on Substack are almost their super fans of sorts to leave wherever they were and go to this new platform. But could you tell us a little bit about your decision to start on Substack and what you think that is kind of shaping out industry wise as another media outlet?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it is another media outlet. I mean, I think we're still kind of in a place with Substack where people want to keep it precious and not super addy or like paid, and I get that and I agree and I like that aspect of it, but I think it's only a matter of time before it becomes like the next iteration of social media. I mean, it is social media. I think people like to pretend it's not. They're like, oh, I'm not on social media except Substack. And it's like, well, Substack is kind of social media.
You just like reading, girl.
Yeah, totally. I know. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great avenue. I absolutely love it. I think it's really fun just to be on. People are funny. There's a lot of humor
Yeah,
there.
a
And
lot.
there's a lot of humor, there's a lot of good writing. I think for me, it was the right platform because I've always wanted to be a writer. And I know I said I always wanted to be a fashion editor, but like I always wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be like Tim Blanks. I wanted to be like a fashion critic who was like reviewing shows and writing stories and writing about fashion. That was like Tim
Hmm.
Blanks was my idol growing up. And I've always loved writing. And I am not a literary person. I have never even considered like an MFA, nothing like that. I'm just not in that circle. Whereas someone who might be interested in fashion might say like, "Oh, I don't know anyone in fashion. I don't know edit, and I'm like, that's like easy, like my world is fashion. My world is not like literary or writing or anything like that. I'm not like academic in that way. And I feel like that's kind of just like a niche that has like a lot of gatekeeping around it.
Yeah.
So Substack is a place for people like me who like to write and have an in. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm able to do what I love on a weekly basis and, kind of get my words out.
Yeah. It's a really beautiful space to get to know your favorite writers or personalities or thought leaders better. I always felt like I had a really great understanding of who your brand was as Miss PR Piggy, and I got to know you through DMs and just like basically inserting myself into your life and being like, "Hey, we're friends now. We're going to talk." And then it was so like amazing. The minute you launched Substack, you were actually the first person I ever followed on Substack. Before that, it was just like the we'll say 2 years ago Substack. I checked it out, but I was like, this
Yeah.
just feels like more reading I don't really have time for, but I love it. Love the idea of it, but I'm not like committed. And when you launched, I was like, okay, like I know you're going to get creative with this. This is just going to be more than like you're popping up an article. And even if you only popped up an article, I love your words. I love how you write so much. But tell us about the decisions that went into how you built out Repressed, which is your Substack brand and everything beautiful about it. But what were some of the decisions you made in building out the Substack? And because there's so many crazy features too, it's a lot more than just posting and blogging. But
Yeah.
tell us about Repressed.
Yeah. Someone kind of put the idea in my head a couple years ago, when I was thinking about quitting my most recent full-time job, which I quit in June of 2023. And then I came out and revealed my identity on Miss PR Piggy a couple weeks later. So it's interesting. I've quit 2 jobs in my life and big things happened with Miss PR Piggy, like right after that.
Mhm.
But anyway, someone had kind of put the bug in my ear, like one of my former colleagues, while I was sort of contemplating quitting my job. And she was you've always been a great writer. Like, you need to have a Substack newsletter. You need to up level Miss PR Piggy. Like, this needs to be your full time job. Like, what are you doing? This is not like, get it out of here. And I was like, whoa, I really needed to hear that. And yeah, I was like, oh my God, a newsletter, obviously. Like, that makes so much sense for me.
Mhm.
So she had planted the seed, and it really took me like 2 years to actually launch it. It was just I was going through a lot of different things within those 2 years. Like, I had a baby who was young, and that's really why I ended up quitting my job. I wanted to spend more time with him while he was a baby. Um, and I mean, I just a lot of decisions. It was definitely torturous, I'm not going to lie. Like, it was a very difficult road to hit publish on it. I think putting yourself out there is very embarrassing and very difficult, and it's not for everybody. And
Yeah.
so now I think that I've done this, and I have this newsletter on a weekly basis, and I really do put myself out there, and I reveal personal things and talk about my work experience. It makes me see other people like so much more kindly, because I'm like, wow, Meghan Markle, like, you want to have a show and like make pasta on TV? Go for it. Like, more power to you.
Yeah.
Like, great job. Like, it is so hard to do that. And I don't think people realize how hard it is to be like, I love something and I want to make something and I want to share it with the world in
Mhm.
any form. I don't care how cheesy it is. It doesn't matter. It is very hard to do.
Mhm.
And even if it is cheesy, there's probably an audience for it, and that's okay. And you don't have to always be the audience for it.
Exactly. Truly. It just makes me think of Thomas Ro- uh that Roosevelt quote about the man in the arena. It's like, if you're either
Yeah,
watching or you're down here. If you're down here, I respect you. If you're watching and trolling me, well, okay.
it's
It's
so
a views
true.
of you, friend, but like, okay, thanks. Keep it
Yes.
moving. There was a moment in hearing you say, like, putting yourself out there, and it made me think, every post you've put out, you're sharing these deeply private things, but there hasn't been a moment outside of you speaking of motherhood, because I'm not a mother, but there hasn't been a moment where I haven't been like you. It may feel very vulnerable to put yourself out there, but my goodness, like, even the things that feel embarrassing to you, I can guarantee 98% of us reading are like, yes, oh my
Yeah.
God, yes.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing but pure respect every time I read your very vulnerable and honest words, because no one tells it like it is these days, especially with the glitz and glamour of the fakeness of Instagram and social media. It's just, I can't tell you how, not only the value it provides to Miss PR Piggy to see that you are the same person in real life as you are behind this account, just being real and just sharing the things, the good and the bad, the highs and the lows, like 13 times of introducing yourself to like finally get remembered. It's like, we have literally all done this. The cringe things you have to do to just put yourself out there and try to like get your client here, do that, like get attention there. It's not for the weak. And I think that, it probably feels really crazy to put it out there, but like, my God, we appreciate you so much for it, because you make us all feel a lot less alone. And the job is very rewarding when it's very rewarding, and it's very draining when it's very draining. And I think I wish more professionals, actual people doing the actual jobs, would be more honest and find a creative spin about how to share that, because we all just need to commiserate together for a little bit, and then things get a little easier. Then we go back to our day, and that was that. But I want you to know, on behalf of all of us, that whatever your intention was for Repressed and Miss PR Piggy, my God, you've blown it out of the water, because it not only helps us get through our day, it really does bring a camaraderie to PR that's been missing for a really long time. And I think you've taken the crowd back for all of us real people out here doing PR. So thanks for making us the cool kids again, because we're cool kids by association with you. And I think it's important to point that out, that it's the era of authenticity. And I think you absolutely helped to usher that in.
Thank you. That's so sweet. Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I think the newsletter in particular, it's like really, it's already kind of shaping up to be a little bit different than what I originally intended. I originally intended to kind of tell like direct stories about like the memes I was creating, and sometimes my memes like naturally fit into what I'm writing about, but it's like becoming less of that, and I think I will continue to do that. It's just interesting that when I started, I was very structured, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have you know sort of like this topic, and I need to like incorporate it with this meme, and it needs to sum up and like have some advice, and there was like a formula I wanted to keep intact, and I feel like it's already kind of morphing into like my diary a little bit and just like my inner thoughts. And it's interesting because I feel like when I do share a little bit more of my worries, or, I say many times in my newsletter that I often experience freelance dread or wonder if I made the right decision. Do I need to go back to full time? It's like that is when I get messages from people that are like, oh my God, I feel the same way. Like I totally get that. So that's really nice. And it has been really fun. I am enjoying it very much. And I hope I get to continue to do it and spend more time on Substack. That is like my goal. Like, I just want to spend more time on there. I want to be contributing there a bit more. But yeah, I've got to strike the right balance with all my other projects and work.
Yeah. How can someone work with you or get in contact with you?
So I'm at Miss underscore PR underscore Piggy Piggy on Instagram. My email is MissPRPiggy@gmail.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's how they can get in touch with me.
Yay. Any meme projects, any PR things? Carrie is absolutely the creative powerhouse that you need to, gosh, help bring a personality to our brands, I think, and incorporate it on social media in a way that really translates and makes sense. I just love your work. I love your creative brain and just all the strategy that's behind it. It's something as simple as just a funny little joke here or there, but there's such layers to your work, and it really does kind of hit so many different angles and types of people all at once. It's just your work is genius. I really do love everything you're doing. I have a final question that I ask all of my guests, and it's
Yeah.
this: Carrie, how do you make your life rich?
I make my life rich by making very deliberate decisions about how I spend my time, especially now that I'm a mom, because spending time with my son is non negotiable. So that has to be part of my day every day.
Love it. Obsessed. So good. Carrie, thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. And everyone, if you haven't already subscribed to Repress, there'll be a link in the show notes for you to do that. And I'll make sure we put Carrie's email and a link to Miss PR Piggy on Instagram as well. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.